We have a quorum. Brittany Guzman tried her best to be here tonight, but she just couldn't do it. Another commitment. But we do have a quorum. It is now 6 p.m. We, the Planning and Zoning Commission, call this meeting to order on April 4th, 2023. It looks like tonight we do have a citizen speaker request, and that would be Miss Julie Davis. And I think you know, if you please could state your name and address, and you could approach the podium. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Julie Davis, 201 Wilmac Cemetery, right here up the street. And the only thing I'm really I'm always really concerned, but in the background, I'm paying attention to item 1 on your agenda tonight, which is the new text amendments to the peddler solicitor vendor section. So I have a couple of comments here. I am adamantly opposed to the new fees. I'm big time concerned. The fees for the permit, you're changing them from a 1-month fee of $20 and a 6-month fee of $50 to a 6-month only fee at $100 and $600. So the fees for a mobile food truck at $600 for 6 months, it doesn't seem like it's that much, but on top of that, they're also paying county fines, insurance, other things to be licensed to stay here, plus their regular insurance. So for a small-time business, to maintain that, and it's not just historic zoning. It was conveyed to me that it was just historic zoning. So let me say that I'm proud that it's not just historic zoning. The fine, as put on page 9 in your agenda packet, shows that this is not just classification for historic district; it's for the entire city. And so the 6-month fee goes from $50 for a mobile food unit to $600. You're looking at a huge increase. We're not talking about just increasing this fine a little bit. You're more than raising it 12 times what it is right now. So that's going to be a hard one to swallow. But additionally, what are you going to do about one-time festival events? You know, the Charlie Diggs Festival, any of these people that are bringing in these food trucks, these vendors for a one-time event. You just got rid of the 1-month permit fee, and you're only going to have a 6-month permit fee on here, which doesn't make sense when we have all these festivals and these events. How are you going to permit those people if they just aren't going to come and do business here? And we thrive in this city on our sales tax revenue. In fact, our sales tax revenue outranks our ad valorem taxes. We make more money in this city on our annual budget on sales tax revenue than we do on ad valorem. So I really encourage you to take a closer look at this. I agree that a lot of this needed to be updated and changed, and it is a phenomenal change. There are some further delves into this I would encourage you to take, especially with the fines and fees. But even more so, page 11, a modification there on 11 in section 6432, you're giving charities exemption to these fines on these permits, but you don't outline or put in here that these need to be specifically IRS regulated 501c3s. So who gets to say whether or not this is a charity event? Because the way that this is worded in here states that an individual, association, organization, or other entity conducting or staging any concert, exhibition, lecture, entertainment, or dance where the gross profits derived therefrom are used solely for charitable or benevolent purposes. And I hate going back to Charlie Diggs, but he is for profit. And so if he comes in and says, well, I'm giving this money away because at the end of the day, I'm giving, $2,000 to Miss Jessie at Chick-fil-A, and I'm giving $500 to Lions Club, and I'm giving $1,000 over here, who regulates and checks his books to make sure that he is solely giving it away? If he's not a regulated 501c3, then you don't have that. There's no check on the back end. We're just giving him reprieve of the permit fees, and there's no checks and balances from the city. So I would encourage you to change that wording too. This also would mean that closing down any streets or roadways, like the Street Dance Festival, is going to be exempt from this, and they aren't a 501c3. It also means things like Sip and Stroll, which we just got rid of, which was a great event and brought tons of foot traffic to our downtown area. We got rid of it because we were over-permitting and over-regulating. So these are huge things I encourage you to look at.
Yes, thank you. And we appreciate your input.
Thanks.
We certainly appreciate you being here and taking your time. These are things that I'm sure we're all going to be discussing because we've had some questions too. And as you know, we don't respond directly to your,
I know.
but we sure appreciate it. And I think there's a workshop coming up too, maybe at some point.
April,
Yeah,
5 p.m.
yes, because I think everything,
Your business.
I'm a resident here in the city. I do own a nonprofit and I have a business, but neither are inside the city.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
but yes, I can't tell you everything that's generated from tonight into the future, the next city council meeting, there will be a kind of a culmination workshop. So this is good.
My nervousness, I think, is just geared to the fact that if we don't do a due diligence here and we pass it on to city council, then it will just be a pass the buck of whose responsibility is it. So it starts here.
Yes, appreciate that.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. And I might state, we appreciate you all being here tonight. We appreciate you all taking your time to be here. As the same as our members here too. We all appreciate taking our time, volunteering time. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 1 on the agenda, and proposed text amendments to Chapter 64, peddlers, solicitors, vendors, in Section 98, Table of Permitted Uses and Special Uses to provide requirements for mobile food units, food trucks, and mobile food courts, food truck parks. So, let me just mention, we're here to learn tonight. We've got a really complete packet put together. This is not an action item, so let's hope we can learn some good things tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Gary Palmer, I'm the city administrator, your city administrator. I've been here about 2.5 months. And I'm here to present this to you. When I got here 2.5 months ago, I met with the individual council members, talked a little bit about what the priorities were, what was going on, what they needed me to handle, short-term, long-term. This was one of the short-term things they asked me to take a look at, come back with some recommended changes that fit for the city of Montgomery. So I did that, and that's what you have before you here tonight. So what I'd like to do is I have a PowerPoint up on the screen, and you have the hard copies in front of you. Also printed out a copy of the ordinance, which the red, this is the black is the actual ordinance, the red are the changes that I'm proposing that we make to that ordinance. If you want to follow along on the PowerPoint, I'll try to hit the main points of the wave tops and then answer whatever questions you may have.
Thank you.
So the brief history of this that I know of is that this has come up a few times over the past couple of years about trying to get some regulations for this activity. Obviously, food trucks have exploded in popularity over the past many years, and a lot of cities are, like Montgomery, are trying to come up with some best practices for this activity. So for me, when I'm asked to do a review of an ordinance, and just to give you a little background, I've been in local government for about 25 years. Have been doing this a long time, have a planning background. So my process that I use is I'll go back and I'll go through my associations through the ICMA, the International City Managers Association. I'll go through the American Planning Association, and I'll tap into our city networks to see what cities out there have looked through this, have gone through this process, have made some of the mistakes that we don't want to make, and have come up with regulations that are business friendly, but also allow the city some sort of level of regulation to make sure that we're controlling what the landscape looks like of our community. So that's what I did. I went back and looked. I looked at Texas communities that I thought were comparable to us. I looked at some other outside communities that I'm familiar with. Asheville, North Carolina has a strong food truck culture. And I looked at some other cities and pulled what I thought were the best ideas and practices that they had in our ordinance. So also with that, I'm looking at the current state definitions for example, on the first part of this ordinance amendment, you'll see that there's a bunch of definitional changes. So these are all changes to kind of clarify what we want to regulate, and these are all pulled from the state law. So all these definitions are pulled from the state law, which cities are animals of the state, if you know anything about Dillon's rule. So my first go-to is going to be the state because that's going to be the ultimate authority on this activity. So the definitional changes you see in there are from that. Anyway, so can you go back to that last one, Dave? So the amendment process, so obviously we want to review the current ordinance and the issues. We want to determine the best practices in local government for whatever activity we're looking to regulate. We want to research comparable communities and come up with the best practices and kind of cherry pick what has worked and what hasn't worked, and then tailor it for the city of Montgomery, put it through a public process, which we're doing, get public input, get other agency input, and tailor an ordinance that works for everybody. So that's what we're here to do, and that's my intent tonight. So if you want to refer to these, and I noticed some people have, I didn't put some copies back here, but I see you guys got those. So if you want to refer to the actual ordinance, I'm going to hit the wave tops on this. So the main changes are we expanded the definitions to provide for mobile food court and mobile food unit or mobile food vendor. You see those definitions in there. And it just kind of expands it a little bit, clarifies it. We do have an applicant that wants to develop a mobile food court in the city. So that's why we're adding this language in here to provide for that activity for this individual. So the mobile food court will cover that as well. Go to the next one, we added exemptions. I think one of the things that was brought up under public comment was about street festivals. So we're exempting food trucks from street festival permits. Like Mud Bugs, if they want to have a bunch of food trucks, it's all under that one umbrella street festival permit. They won't have to pay for an additional mobile food vendor, mobile food unit permit. It's all under that one permit. So we're eliminating that fee for street festivals. So if you're an individual mobile food unit, yeah, you got to come in and you got to get a permit and you got to pay the fee. If you're going to be with a street festival that's already pulling a permit, like Mud Bugs, you're covered. So we're exempting that. And then you see some of the other definitions that kind of comply with state law. Cottage food products, if you're selling stuff out of your house, if it's prepackaged, that's exempt. Ice cream trucks, obviously, they seem to have been around before we were born, so I don't, those are one of those things where I don't know how you regulate that activity unless you want to dedicate somebody to be chasing around ice cream trucks. So we're proposing to eliminate ice cream trucks from this. I think one of the things that was brought up in the public comment was the charities, so we'll look at that. I mean, I want to make sure we capture everything, so we need to provide some definitions that cover charities, what a charity is, a 501c, whatever. We need to pull document-wise to verify that, we'll do it. So we can make that modification. You go to the next one, Dave. We also define where you can do this activity and where you cannot. And that's where you all come into play. So the municipal code covers most of the vendor ordinance. What we're getting into with the planning and zoning is the table of uses. So if you go to the table of uses, and if you could go one more slide, Dave. And I know you can't see it in the audience, it's in your package, but the table of uses you'll see up there, it has the zoning districts. And I can't read it from here, but it looks like R1, R2, B, ID, I, and then CC. And those are, R1 is residential, R2 is multifamily residential. Is commercial district, business district. ID is industrial, I is institutional, and CC is city council, which means they have to go through a special use process. So if you go to that middle section on the slide where you see the red, what I'm proposing is that mobile food units are permitted in the commercial district, they're permitted in the industrial district, and they're permitted in the institutional district by right and by permit. However, if you want to operate a mobile food unit within the commercial district, under the historic district overlay, you have to go through a special use process. And you see an asterisk there, and then it goes down to the bottom of the table, and the next portion of that where it refers to the special use process. Also, mobile food courts. And this really defines the overall regulations for mobile food court proposals. Mobile food courts are more than, I think it's 2 or more food trucks that want to get together to offer services. So a mobile food court, all they would have to do is go through the special use process, which is a lengthy process and it's exhaustive, but and you all should know this because they're going to have to come to you, get a recommendation from planning and zoning, provide a site plan, provide all the elements that we require on a typical site plan. You guys will hold a public hearing, make a recommendation, transmit that to the city council, just like we're doing tonight with a text amendment, and then they would have to get approval from the city council to get permission to do that activity within the historic district overlay. So that is one thing that we are adding in that. And that's really what is involved in the planning and zoning portion. Can you hit the slide before this? Okay, so
And let me just go back, let me just ask, please to clarify, definition now would be 2 food vendors, 2 food trucks or more, it is considered a food truck park.
yeah, I mean, the exact definition is in there. It's on that first slide.
Yes,
So mobile food court means a land use approved through a special use permit. See section 98-27 special use permits and section 98-88 table of permitted uses and special uses, and developed in conformity with an approved site plan where 2 or more mobile food vendors congregate to offer edible goods for sale to the public.
yes,
So that's the definition of mobile food court.
just clarifying.
If 2 or more becomes a food court, do we have regulations on what a food court has to provide to sustain those? Water, electric, grease?
Bathrooms.
Yes,
Restrooms.
that'll all be captured under that special use permit process.
But we haven't got to that point.
We don't have strict regulations or an application for mobile food court. If this gets approved, once I've got the actual codified ordinance, then I can go in and create these applications. So, you know, for me, when you're talking about mobile food courts, it really is a temporary use because you're not putting infrastructure in. They could clear that lot out within a day and it'd be back to normal or back to laying it that it originally was. So for me to try to restrict this like you would restrict a development, a permanent development that's going to come in, businesses would want to come here for that. So when we're looking at these ordinances, I want to try to be as less bureaucratic as possible,
Right.
less red tape, but also provide for a process where we can still control what we let into the city and how it's going to act when they're here. So yes, the special use process is wide open. It's going to depend on who's sitting in your chairs. It depends on the public comment. It depends on who's sitting in the city council chairs. And to me, that's really how the process should work anyway.
I know, these gentlemen here, the food truck court that they're proposing, has full-fledged facilities. Or is that what's going to be required if another 2 or more come into the city?
Could be. I mean, I think at this point, it's a new activity. Like with anything, we're gonna have to stick and move and kind of pilot this thing.
And if not, I know there's been talk in the past that if you come on a site, I don't know what the county's guidelines are, you can be here for X amount, then you have to pull off for X amount.
So I can answer that. So in my research, that you talk about the 48-hour, you need
Yes.
to move it. So that's not a regulation. That's actually just on the cover of the application, and that refers to them having to move up every 48 hours to change out their water, their gray water,
Right.
and their regular water. We don't have that requirement, and I don't know how you police that anyway. And if we were to do that, so if you think about it this way, we're requiring someone who's doing a mobile food unit to get permission from the property owner to exist there, because you can't do it on public property. So that means if I want to do a mobile food unit, I've got to approach this person's a private property owner and get his permission. Well, if we're requiring them to move every 2 days, that means that person's got to go to another person every 2 days and get permission to locate on that property. So just, for me, I understand the intent. I'm not a big fan of putting in regulations that you really can't enforce.
The only thing I'm worried about is people using it as a storage.
Sure.
They don't have the capability of moving the trailer around, they find some place, they park it, and it's their storage lot.
Yeah. And again, I mean, it's a license, it's a permit, so it's 6 months. And I don't want to jump ahead, but kind of,
But you can park a trailer in your driveway inside the city limits and store it on your driveway. We don't have a regulation against that. So if it's on
I
private
don't know.
property and you're storing a food truck, what's the difference?
if it's commercial,
It's still private private property.
Yeah, but you can't have a commercial use of it. If it's residential district, and it would depend on the district. So it would just be a case by case.
Well, yeah, that's okay. We need to stay on track. And I kind of interrupted you, but, so I'd like to let you get back to where you were.
Sure.
But I think at this point, we all realize, I think the gist of what you're saying is we're moving to a special use permit system, which we've been doing with other things. So far, it sounds great. I think you're trying to keep it simple, but at the same time, you got to consider the state, you got to consider everything else. That said, I think, as we go forward, I think we want to talk a little bit about leasing, whether if the property is private versus owned by the owner, those kind of things. But
Yeah, so kind of referring to,
I have a question.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. We do have food trucks already that are sitting in downtown. It's private property, the gentleman owns it. It's the ice cream place, the hot dog place.
Yes.
And it comes and goes, and I heard 2 or more. When does it turn into a court if the 2 and more, it fluctuates? I know that the ice cream truck is pretty permanent, but the other one that comes and goes, and there might have been a third one there, is that going to be constituted as a food court? I know Mr. Clevenger owns that area, so I'm just trying to clarify. If we have a food court over here across from Jim's, and then we might have some food trucks down here at the other end, down the hill, what is inside this city limit? What is that Mr. Clevenger is doing?
If this is adopted, yes, by definition, he would be a mobile food court. If he has 2 or more that are congregating for the purpose of selling food, yes, he would be a mobile food court.
And that's a special use that he would have to get even though he owns that property?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just
No,
clarifying.
I want to make sure that, that everybody's on the same page.
Is it congregation for any amount of period of time, or if
Yeah,
they're
that's my
ever
guess.
there at the same time, that's considered congregating?
Yeah, I mean, if your intent is, and that's a great question, because if your
If
intent
you have
is,
a one-day food truck come by, they have to be a part of that food court
yeah, I mean,
application?
I think the intent is so we don't have a whole bunch of food trucks in one area that are just kind of itinerant, coming and going.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the whole thing with the fee, and I certainly don't want to get hung up on the fee schedule and the duration, and that's up to, it doesn't matter to me. This is kind of just a starting point. So the reason why that I'm looking at $600 and kind of changing out that whole structure, the other classes, when you're talking about peddlers, solicitors, hawkers, I think it says transient driver in the heart center. Those are all activities that you want to regulate, but like I was saying earlier, people aren't coming in and pulling these permits.
Yeah.
So you also want to have these applicants having some skin in the game. You don't want to have some fly-by-night folks coming in and just getting that has a garbage food truck and coming in and getting a $50 permit and then going and setting up somewhere and just not doing anything.
If you're considered a food court, there's 2 people there, do they have to supply?
okay, I'm sorry, this isn't open for question back and forth. And I know where you're going, but we just can't do it because then we might get off subject, but there may be a time to do that. Let's continue on. Yeah.
So did I to answer your
You
question?
answered my question.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you answered mine too.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't, if you guys will make a recommendation on what in this ordinance, I would love your feedback, and I'll take that to the council.
Sure.
I don't know what the answer is to the fees. It's, the feedback I got from the council was, you've got some brick and mortar restaurants that are suffering. Is it fair to allow food trucks to come in and set up and only have to pay $50? And I understand the whole sales stuff. And we can get into analysis over that, and that's fine, or we can just decide as a community how we want to handle this, but, is it fair to allow them to come in? And that's where the higher fee comes into play, having a little skin in the game. A serious true food truck vendor is not going to come in and pay $600 for a 6-month permit if they're not serious about doing business. $50, I don't know, maybe roll the dice and just try to come set up somewhere, and So again, I
Yes, and
don't want to get hung up on the fees.
yes, it was just a red flag because that's a real stout increase. And it's a good question, but I think those are things we will discuss in more detail later, because we've heard a lot of things. The simplest way I can put it is, I understand the argument about brick and mortar and they pay, what they pay. But a real full-blown restaurant has a heck of a lot more potential for a lot more revenue than a food truck. So it's all, in my mind, let's try to keep it proportioned. If the food truck guy owns the land, he bought it, he paid up front, he paid a lot of money, and he's also paying property taxes, and he's got all his other expenses. And so let's just try to, everybody keep perspective on, I don't feel like these food trucks are gonna, they're not generating all that much. But, so I think that's the key here on fees and everything else, and then those things can be looked at later. And tonight, we really just want to get an overall feel for it. There's pros and cons. But, let me just, and I don't mean to, again, delay you, but I just wasn't sure about the definition of it.
And then on the bottom of the slide that's up, so some of the other things that I think I might have said earlier, a lot of times we'll go in there. So we expanded the information required for the application. So if you look at some of the sections at the end of the ordinance, I list a whole bunch of things that are required in the application, and down below I eliminated those things from the sections. So instead of having them repeated twice, I just pulled what we needed for the application, and then eliminated, I think one of them had to do with like auto insurance, some other stuff. That's all stuff we gather through the application process. So again, just cleaning it up, streamlining it, and just removing any unnecessary bureaucracy out of that. You need the next one, Dave?
On your redlining, under exemptions, when you put if engaged in interstate commerce, I just wasn't sure.
That's a state definition?
Yeah.
So is that red or is that, where are we at here?
It was under exemptions.
Oh, okay, so I just outlined for interstate commerce. I don't know why that's in there. It's just, I just changed it to exemptions.
Okay. So the question will come up, and I'm sure when you looked at some of this stuff, maybe you're comparing to other cities or areas on the fees, and that's logical.
Well, fees were all over the place. I looked at fees, and it really, I didn't find a consistency with the fees.
Yeah.
I don't, again, I don't know what the market is for this business or activity. I don't know what's fair.
Yes.
And that's really what this process should determine. What's fair for the city, what's fair for the business. And that's really, my goal is to make sure that we're doing things the right way.
You gave the recommendations for the fees to be changed based on your research of what you were doing, and you're presenting it to us, and we are going to research ourselves, and then we're going to make recommendations, because we really don't know. I don't know how much food truck.
Right.
Well, the fees specifically, like I said, they were all over the place, so my thought was getting the feedback from the council. They wanted to see a higher fee to kind of level the playing field. My thought is, hey, we have some skin in the game, applicant, and if you're serious about doing business, you'll pay the fee. Is this the right fee? Should it be $300? Is that enough? I just don't know. I don't know what the market is.
But it's something that we can look into. Is what
Yes,
you're saying.
please provide
All right.
recommendations on that. I'd love feedback.
So, on the application, these are people that do want a part of the game. They want to come in, put the money, they're buying into it. And this is addressing those persons that will come in here and do the right thing. Are we regulating, or is there guidelines for those? I'm just asking this question. I don't have a problem with it, but I'm just asking. Jim's has a food truck, had a food truck out there. I'm fine with it. It's great food. That's just a food truck, and that person came here and got a permit to do that?
I don't know, Dave.
I'm just saying.
Without knowing.
But I'm just saying, is that?
Is the way the process works now. They would come and they would get
Okay.
a food vendor permit. And
But if Jim said, hey, Joey, I want your food truck out here, can he invite them on his private property? I'm just asking out of curiosity.
He's got a permit, but yes, he can solicit. But every mobile food vendor has to get a permit.
Okay, all right.
Unless, you're under a street festival,
Okay.
according to this.
Right.
And sitting up in his parking lot, and I'm just using him as an example because it's easy, but during the wine fest, during whatever, and Jim said, hey, look, I want you, this German truck in my parking lot. Is that the umbrella of the festival?
Yeah, if they've got a street festival permit, rock and roll.
I think I see the distinction that you're making. If Jim is just on the outside or the periphery of the, then
Yeah.
no, he's not part of it.
Okay, I'm just making clear.
He's
I
got to
just-
be part of
The inside where the gate perimeter. Okay, I'm just,
You know, whether there's a physical fence or not,
Okay.
a street
Yeah.
festival would have a defined boundary. And so if he was inside that boundary, then he's part of it, but if he's just, well, he's only half block away, that would really be outside the
Okay.
street festival.
all right.
Okay.
That's good.
And I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it, but I made a note under street festivals, line 5, something about redlined,
Are we in the definitions?
I'm sorry, I'm
What
trying.
is it, street festival?
It was
or
under street festival line,
Page 6 is where street festival.
oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, page, section 64-6, street festivals. It's page 8 on what we've got here on the computer.
Okay.
Line 5. And it was redlined. Just wondering what that meant.
Yeah, we're taking that out because if we left it in, that means they would be required to get a permit.
Okay,
So street festivals, we're eliminating that to exempt them, because they're exempt for street festivals, so that would be conflicting.
okay, yeah, you've already answered the question, I'm sorry. I
No,
just-
no problem.
Yeah, thank you.
I know there's a lot of changes in there.
Okay,
And before the meeting, we talked about the hours. So I
Yes.
just want to touch on that again. Page 12, I think it's section B, number 4, it said 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and earlier, I'm saying it's 64-5 hours of residential solicitation. The 9 was crossed out, it was changed to 10 a.m. and 7 was crossed out and changed to 5 p.m. The only reason I'm bringing this up is if you were looking through these ordinance, like when I was scanning and reading, it popped out to me because you changed it, suggested it to be a change, and then when you go down into the body of some more information, it states other hours.
What section is that?
Okay, which one? The one that I'm going by is 64-5,
Yep.
hours of residential solicitation.
Got it.
And I think you broke that down for me before we started. It's an hours of residential solicitation.
Right.
But then I'd have to scan down through here, but as I turn the pages, there's other hours in here that are different than those
Can you
hours.
tell me where? I don't
So
know.
I'm getting to
Okay,
it.
I see one.
Yeah, one is, yeah.
So
yeah, at the bottom.
Page 12, line item 4 and 5.
what's, do you know the section?
Section number 6432, it starts on page 11 and carries over to 12.
Yeah. I just want to, as a person who's scanning these and we're people that are going to look at our,
Residential solicitation versus the requirements of the operational hours for a mobile unit. So one is door-to-door solicitation, your Girl Scouts knocking on doors, that's the hours of that. And the other one is the hours that a mobile food truck is allowed to be open and operational. That's the difference in the times.
all right, I just want to make sure.
Sorry.
We discussed this before the meeting, but I wanted to say it on the record while we're in the meeting, because people look on this website and they will scan and they will go, oh, well, this is different without reading and without getting more information.
Yeah, and you're going to find different time sections in there in our building codes. I mean, there's
But
a,
I just want to bring it,
Yeah, that's-
you had explained it before
Good
we
point.
started.
We'll get back to your question, too. Okay.
what else can I answer for you?
Are Girl Scouts required to pay a permit fee?
Girl Scouts for,
Residential solicitation.
they're supposed to, I guess. I don't
According
know.
to this, $100 fee.
Yeah, I mean, if they're not exempt, I guess they're supposed to be getting a permit.
Where is the local example that you used?
There's a bunch of them. I can give you guys a list. Like I looked at Brian. I don't have my computer in front of me, but I can tell you the ones I pulled it from. But I think Brian was one. College Station, I looked at Houston.
Something similar to,
Yeah, something I thought that a city that we know, that we all know what cities do things right. You know,
Yeah.
we all have those examples.
Right.
So I look at those cities, and like I said, I looked at other states. You know, this is a national
okay. Just-
cultural type of trend, so there's other cities that have good ordinances as well.
Not Texas, so.
You know,
That'd be different than Texas.
as we
I do have another question, though. Julie did bring it up, and she is speaking. I am kind of curious to find out, with a Girl Scout group or a Boy Scout group, could they fall under the special use where they wouldn't have to pay something? But I'm just
I'd have
asking.
to research it.
Okay. Could
So I
you?
mean, they may be exempt at the state level.
They probably are, knowing the organization, both organizations, but hey, she brought it up, and I'm curious,
Like
but.
literally past things or sports club.
Yeah, I mean, I think by definition, if you're soliciting, you should get a permit.
All right.
We all know about those activities that go on out there that
Yeah.
we know they're not permitted, and it's an enforcement issue.
Yeah.
We've got one code enforcement officer,
Yep.
so it's tough.
Have we come to the part about the charity?
I just said I was going to look at that, and
Yeah,
if there was a conflict, I would add language in there to make sure that
Okay,
We're
you are going to
exempt.
look into, okay,
or
Thank you.
require proof of being a charity.
okay.
Okay, and the definitions really helped us too to clarify, but obviously, mobile food truck is a self-contained unit, a concession trailer, self-contained but pulled, they're all gonna come under the same, whether they're self-propelled or not. And I already alluded to this, but I think as we move forward, we do need to continue, address the situation of the transient dealer as opposed to if the property is owned by the person that's on it. Just because it's two different animals, really.
You talking about the fee?
Yeah. Or anything else.
Well, if it's someone like Manny who's going to own the property, I don't know if you plan, do you own the property now? Or you guys going to own the property? So if it's someone who owns a property,
Yeah,
yeah.
We've owned it for a year and a half.
Yeah, so if you own the property and you want to do a business on there, yeah, I think that's fair that we
Yeah.
look at that.
yeah, and I
So
think
now-
you were trying to consider that, but in some of those definitions, but there is a difference we have to consider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But are you saying 5 o'clock is the limit for food trucks? Or no?
No.
Door-to-door neighborhood solicitation.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
I only had one other question, that pertains a little bit more to us. If it's inside the historic district, is there a precedent set for the appearance of it, or do we have any say on that moving forward?
If it's inside the historic district, they've got to come to you for that special use permit. So yes, you have absolute say over all that stuff. Well, it will be a recommendation to the city
Yeah,
council.
exactly.
Yeah, but I think as P and Z goes, we could look at it like we always do with.
With anything else.
Yeah, it's like signage, or any of that, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just go over the next step. So obviously tonight, I'm asking you all to review it. When you're ready, call for a public hearing. I guess it's required by the state or whatever our ordinance requires. Solicit whatever feedback y'all would like to solicit and transmit your report to the council. I don't, whatever normal process that is.
So for the table of uses amendment, so the chapter 64 is for feedback from you. It's not a required part of the process. The council can update chapter 64 without the input of P&Z, since this really does touch on land use. It would be good to have the perspective of P&Z. The piece that you guys will have to act on is amending the table of uses. And so that's the next agenda item, is to call a public hearing to add those two definitions, the mobile food unit and mobile food court, to the table of uses. We treat that in order to do that, it's almost like a rezoning in terms of the mechanical steps. We need to call a public hearing, we need to hold a public hearing, and give a recommendation to council. Again, it can include the bits that you want to address in chapter 64, but the meat of what we're doing is the amendment of 98-88, which is our zoning table of uses. So the next item is not a public hearing on the food truck ordinance. It'll be to amend those table of uses to add mobile food unit.
And that's the entire city in,
Right.
who will be invited?
Right.
Okay.
Right, to the public hearing, right, just like any
Yeah,
public
okay.
hearing.
But can I ask you a question? The public hearing is not for chapter 64, it's only for those two terms, correct?
That's right.
Yes.
I mean, for me, it's up to, if y'all, you know, this, you can't really do an amendment without the context of the other one. So I would welcome all feedback, and the more public the process is, to me, the better. So if y'all want to make recommendations on all this, please. I
Okay.
would appreciate that.
So really, yeah, under tonight, there's really two parts to it. We want to, commission review hearing. So, I'm sorry. First of all, we do want to call for a public hearing, but we can also tonight transmit our recommendations from what we've heard.
Right, it could even be after this meeting, if you guys, you know, want to follow up with this and give recommendations again. The council is going to workshop this on the 11th, next Tuesday. They're not going to take action. The only action, you know, related that they'll take is I'm going to ask them to call a public hearing on the table of uses amendment, because to do that, they have to have a public hearing as well. But to Gary's point, you know, you can't, it's hard to just talk about the table of uses without why we're doing it, which is the revision of the mobile food vendor.
What format would it be under? If we called a public hearing, would it be similar to this, where Gary would come and we'd talk, just like we're talking right now?
It'd be just
The
like-
citizens would be included, and they would carry on the conversation as well?
Right.
Stepping up to the podium and taking their turns, asking
Right, there's
questions?
not a whole
or-
lot of dialogue in a public hearing.
Okay.
And you've got to be careful with, you
Yes.
know,
Right.
getting into a deliberation, but certainly, you know, any comments, either from the P&Z or from the public, are allowed in the public
Okay.
hearing.
So in other words, for the next May 2nd P&Z meeting, the goal was to have a public hearing at that time, correct?
For item,
Yeah,
for item 2.
on May 2nd.
Okay.
And there is we have two.
We're going to have two public hearings.
Oh.
State law requires to have public hearings.
Yeah, total.
So,
Well, let me just mention at this point, you know, this commission had asked under inquiries, I think a couple meetings ago, to have a workshop with maybe city council or MEDC. This, I think, works even better, because this way, you did the research, we've got some detail. So just want to say thank you for getting to this point, because it gives us a baseline. Where, you know, I think the workshop we don't need to be at that workshop. This,
we are planning a workshop with the city council and MEDC for, check my dates, I want to say, yep, April 17th. That's a Monday night. That's MEDC's normal meeting night. So we're going to workshop council, P&Z, and MEDC. It's just kind of a goal setting, goal affirmation, which direction are we all thinking that we're heading in a workshop. That we'll be sending out information on here soon. But the public hearing that I'm asking you to call in this next item is to amend the table of uses.
yeah, okay.
All right. Okay.
You guys have other questions for Gary or me on those changes to chapter 64?
I'm good. I mean, nothing until I
I'm good.
read through it.
This is a discussion only item, no formal action.
Okay.
So you just, recommendation. So,
What are we on to?
Do we need to move on to 2?
Still on
yeah,
one.
no more questions, right? Okay.
No.
Okay.
Great. Thank you for the presentation, sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes,
Thank you.
Nice meeting y'all.
Nice to meet you too.
I'll leave you to it.
appreciate it. Okay, on to item 2, consideration and possible action on calling 2 public hearings to be held on May 2nd, 2023, related to proposed amendments to Section 9888, Table of Permitted Uses of the City Code of Ordinances.
So Commissioners, again, this action item would be to call a public hearing because that is what is required for state law anytime you amend the zoning code. And again, those 2 amendments would be to add mobile food unit, mobile food court to the table of permitted uses.
Okay.
This is where adding chapter 64 makes a difference, or not.
What's
If
that?
you leave it as stated, only section 9888 can be discussed at the meeting. If you include chapter 64 as it's written in number 1, then both 64 and 9888 can be discussed in the open meeting.
To our point, if you guys want to add, chapter 64 to it, then people can speak on that as well. No issues at all doing that. Again, it'll just be down to staff to, again, just ensure that the meat of what we're doing, the amendment to the table of uses gets captured and it's clean and we're, in compliance with state law.
Okay, but what, the workshop is in April?
It's next week.
Right, the joint workshop is going to be in April. They're not going to be, again, they're not going to be, council won't be acting on this on the 11th.
I understand.
So
But there will be a workshop.
council's going to workshop the food truck ordinance revisions on April 11th.
Will that include 64 or just 98?
That's only 64 on.
Oh, only 64 on the 11th, April 11th.
But the public hearing is after.
Yeah,
that,
May 2nd.
So it really wouldn't make
That
it.
9888 only refers to the 2
Right.
definitions of mobile
Right.
food truck and food court.
Right.
I mean, candidly, if somebody's, has
There's not much
suggestions.
to discuss on that. It's,
Right.
Well, I mean, we can throw it in there, but the meat,
In terms of, if
Right.
there's a member of the public looking to, to give the city input on chapter 64, this body is okay to present that concern to, but you guys aren't the ones going to be voting on chapter
Right.
64. It's going to be council.
well, I'd like to hear if there's any input.
Yeah.
but their recommendation carries weight to the council.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. It's just,
Yeah.
it's up to you guys on the way you want to do it. What my job is to keep us in compliance with state laws, first and foremost. So that's,
Sure. Sounds like a good idea.
I would like to hear the community's input
I
on
would
both.
too.
Yeah.
On both.
I'm interested in what the other people around, I mean, we're versatile, this panel is, but we're not the city.
I just don't want to get to a situation like we had last year where it got so heated and there were 300 emails and our lives are being threatened. I don't ever want to get to that point again because we didn't have integrity to be completely transparent.
100%.
Okay.
Swing the doors wide open and let's walk it all the way through with everybody saying what they want to say.
That way we can say it's all out there.
That's it.
That's the
And they
easy.
can't say they didn't have an opinion. If you close the doors and maybe don't give them one, then you give them a leg to stand on to say, you didn't let me have my say.
Thank you. I'll make a motion then to hold 2 public hearings on May 2nd, 2023 at 6 p.m. at Montgomery City Hall over Section 64 and Section 9888 amendments.
I second that.
We have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. No opposition, the motion passes. Excuse me. Great. All right, moving on to item number 3, consideration and possible action on a draft preliminary report for a rezoning request from Cornerstone Community Church for 14740 Liberty Street from R1 Single Family Residential to I Institutional.
Commissioners, this item, you see the next page is the preliminary report. That is just a factual report of the situation and disposition of the land, the zoning around the land. In order to have a public hearing on a draft report, we need a draft report. That's what we're doing before we go into public hearing.
We're doing it.
God bless the law.
All right.
Cool.
I make a motion that we look into for the draft preliminary report for rezoning request for Cornerstone Community Church for 14740 Liberty Street for R1 Single Family Residential to I Institutional.
I'll second.
Okay.
Can we have a public,
We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Are we going to do this on May 2nd as well?
That's today.
For
May,
this process,
yes?
yes, ma'am.
All right. So we'll be busy May 2nd. Pack a snack.
On the final.
I just want to make sure that we don't need any more discussion on this.
How is that ever zoned residential in the first place? I mean,
They-
that has never been residential.
Well, they bought a third of an acre from Sharonda Hughes.
Oh,
So Sharonda's property to the south
gotcha.
of their property was zoned or is zoned R1 single family.
Gotcha.
They bought a third of an acre and are asking to rezone that to institutional.
Yeah.
So your last action was to approve the draft preliminary report, so now we can go into our 2 public hearings. That's your discretion.
Okay. So on to item number 4. Convene into public hearing number 1 on the preliminary report for rezoning request for R1 Single Family Residential to I Institutional at 14740 Liberty Street, Montgomery, Texas.
It may be worth noting that we're opening the public hearing at 6:50.
I was just going to say, I'm sorry, yes. Opening for public hearing at 6:52. Okay, and apparently there is no, did you have any comments, Dave?
I spoke with someone who lives in Buffalo Springs who was just looking for clarification. He said that I received the letter, he didn't have any objections at all, he just wanted to make sure that he understood what was being asked.
Okay.
The only thing that I had brought up before the meeting and was just talking was it is a church and it is moving to institutional zoning, and it does back right up into that neighborhood behind it, and they're supposed to leave some greenery, or if you want to call it that, but if you drive by, there's not much greenery left. But the only reason I bring this up is because I live near and around where there's another church who grew largely, and there was, you could hear and you could see, and there was lights involved in all that. And there was an issue that went before the city and all that. So evidently the neighborhood behind them didn't want to come to the meeting and find out what they could or couldn't be allowed to do. I don't know what much more they could do with that little bitty piece of property, make a parking lot, put some lights out there for them to be able to park at dark or whatever. I don't foresee them putting a big old gymnasium out there with lights and music and stuff like that. But I wanted to bring it up because
Well, these are important points, and I did too, and I think we've all had those thoughts. I think at item 6 would be, we can make those points tonight on item 6. Right now, this is the public hearing, so
Yeah.
let's go on, let's do that.
Okay.
Okay. So, other than that comment from the one Buffalo Springs resident, that's it.
Yes, sir.
And because they got the letter in the mail because they're within 200 feet. Okay. Moving on to number 5, convening to public.
We'll close this public hearing at 6:54.
We'll close this public hearing at 6:54. Item number 4, convene into
5.
I'm sorry, item number 5, convene into public hearing, thank you. Number 2, public hearing on preliminary report for a rezoning request from R1 Single Family Residential to I Institutional at 14740 Liberty Street, Montgomery, Texas. And it is now, we're opening into public hearing number 2 at 6:55.
As a reminder, this is the second public hearing that is required by law. State law says you have to have public hearings. It doesn't tell you to, it just has to be, you have to hold a plural amount of hearings. You do not have to separate those by months or days or weeks.
Okay.
It's worth mentioning real quick before you move off this public hearing, that this church, I believe is leased. Arnett Easley, I believe, still owns this property. Maybe the church bought it, but I know Arnett owned it. But they also are operating on driveway variants, and so if the intention is to buy this third of an acre and extend the driveway around to that
Right.
north side of the building, then you need to kind of keep that in mind, that whatever we make them jump through now, we're gonna make them jump through on that driveway when they expand it, so.
Right.
Yes.
I believe they have the crushed granite down.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for thank you for the input. All right. Now we can close public hearing number 2 at 6:57. Moving on to item number 6, consideration of possible action on a final report for a rezoning request for 14740 Liberty Street from R1 Single Family Residential to I Institutional as submitted by Cornerstone Community Church.
Members of the commission, you have a draft report in front of you that mirrors past reports. This is really just intended as a starting point, so we're not starting from scratch, but please feel free to edit, add, or amend this in any way that you see fit.
I'll just mention, to get back to what Marian's point, very well taken, under comments on the diagram, bullet number 2 under comments on that draft,
Yes.
I think that really says a lot right there. We need to ensure that any future development on that 1/3 acre provides a buffer for adjacent residential uses per city code. In other words, if they intend to do something down the road, it has to be reviewed. And I think we all have the same thoughts. The things we've seen from the past is two issues. There's always a possibility of bright lights shining into somebody's residential area or noise. So
one of the pieces that we've not touched on here, but one of the parts of the process that the church is going through as a part of purchasing this land is they're platting it all as one. So when they plat that land, that's where that 25-foot vegetative setback and buffer comes from against any land that's used as single family. So that would be really on 3 sides of them, they will have a 25-foot buffer, which...
Is that 25-foot buffer? The privacy fence already there.
Right.
Is there going to be 25 foot of vegetation?
There has...
Or is it on the other side of the private?
It can be grass, but 25 foot inside that fence on their property. They can't put any structures, any buildings. My interpretation of a vegetative setback is if vegetation can grow on it. In other words, parking cannot be allowed in a vegetative setback. The city has interpreted that differently in past years. I don't see how. To me, again, if you have a vegetative setback, it should be able to support some type of vegetation.
Right.
Whether it's grass at a bare minimum, or whether it's, shrubs or small trees that are going to, really block or screen something.
I really would like to make sure that is something that is the ordinance person observes on a regular basis, because what we try to do, or what I'm up here trying to do, is make sure that once we make rulings and decisions, that it doesn't fall back on us later and we have to discuss it later. You know what I mean? Like, we've already had the church issue with the noise and the lights, and that was, hopefully they worked it out amongst themselves finally. But in this very public area,
They haven't.
in this very public area, you can see from 149 into the back of the neighborhood, in behind the church currently. You know, they don't have the residential area does not have privacy fences. Yeah, it looks like barbed wire. But I just want to make sure that that's somewhere where it's 25 foot, and that's what it means. It's like, if they do put curbs up there to park their cars up against there, then it's 25 foot from the fence to where the curb is where they park, on both sides.
Yeah, yes, we all have the same concern. And Dave, I did want to ask you, you know, the church has been very, so far, they want to be a good neighbor, back when we talked earlier. But I know what's happened. There is one large industrial, I think, mercury vapor light or whatever, on the building, or it's on a pole. But we've got 3 yards in Buffalo Springs that back up to that area. And one guy at the pool, he cleared that area, and now he's more exposed, and others have done more clearing. So maybe in the end, the church could come up with an agreement to either put a shield over that light or put vegetation, you know, put some wax myrtles there that grow up tall enough to hide it. But I think that's just developed recently because of more clearing. But the point is, even if what if the church went out of business 3 years down the road, whoever comes in there, you know, we're rezoning that one section, and we have to keep in mind what could happen. But I think what gives us the confidence is that any changes have to be still approved.
But the one nice thing is it's being rezoned institutional and not commercial.
Yes.
Yes.
If somebody comes in there and asks to be commercial, we can say no to that. So
Yes.
this piece of land is kind of designated now.
Right, institutional is very limited.
Right,
It's
right,
very limited.
Right.
Yeah. Technically, where the church is itself, there is not enough wood. You can't have a 25-foot vegetation area. It's not. I don't think there's enough room there for it. But in the past, I think it's kind of, some of these kind of issues. Maybe they just put in a bunch
But they're going to have to supply a plat.
They've got that 25-foot buffer
Right.
on the plat. So,
Right.
so they wouldn't be able to encroach that with any future plans or anything they come in. They wouldn't have to reference the zoning code. It's going to be on their site, you know, data that's recorded at the county that there is that 25-foot buffer. So.
Okay. But I think they just put down sod on the new 3rd acre, so I don't necessarily think they're planning on a parking area. That's what made me wonder, you know, for example, if it became a playground and it was going into the evening with lights and things, you know, that's where they would have to get approval. Yeah.
But would they?
Although I wouldn't
I know.
have a playground in a vegetative setback area.
Well,
But the
yeah.
lights,
Say again?
the lighting, yeah, I think that's more what he's.
Right, you know, the development of it would require the same type of a review that any other development would. So lighting would be reviewed by the city engineer for conformance with lighting code.
That third of the acre, I know when they started developing it, they asked about the special use for the type of pavement that they were going to use, and we approved what it is that they have now. Do they have to come back to us if they want to extend that parking lot for the same request to, okay? They just can't do it because we said okay to this. Okay. I'm just asking.
The area that the parking lot was not as big as it could ever get.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, also north and south, I mentioned Buffalo Springs, but there's also the house that's been there for years that they're right up against, to the south. So that's obviously another reason that anything would have to be approved, because this 3rd acre is right up against that property line.
But a letter did go out and only one citizen responded, so.
Right. The property owner to the south, again, that's who sold the church the property, so I don't think she would
Yeah.
I don't think she had any objections. I think she-
Okay.
Well, and this does,
Sons or daughters.
Yeah, I'm told I shut your
Yeah.
window.
and the letter from the church does mention future, there has been some talk about, it's not official, but future commercial, that whole corridor. And
That was my comment.
that's kind of an issue where we have to look at that too.
That was my question.
Oh,
So
he's got another
with
question.
it does state the future land use plan does identify it as a future. It's more of a question, comment for us to think of future, but
Right.
it does expanding the land, does that push back the point of purchase for alcohol for future commercial, or is that from the door of the church?
It is door to door.
Door to door, door to
Because the
point?
food trucks are coming.
Yep, so for a GABC permit, because before they bought this property, they were looking at a vacant building right in downtown on,
Right.
Yeah.
149. And
It was within.
so, in that process, we, did affirm that it is a door to door.
Okay. What's that distance?
I believe it's 300 feet
300,
as measured.
okay, I couldn't
You don't measure across the property, you've got to go out the door of the beer or alcohol establishment to the right of way, and then down the right of way to the door of the church
Okay.
or school. Schools are, I believe, 1,000 feet, but I'm a little fuzzy on TABC laws, but churches, alcohol are 300.
So just to confirm, this shouldn't impact anything like that.
Right.
Not that amazing. At this point,
The same spot, so.
It would just be a future consideration for any potential business.
All right.
So we've voiced a few concerns, and I think we've answered the,
Right, if you guys want to add anything to this draft, let's just articulate this now so I know exactly what to add and where.
I think we're fine. I think
I
on your
think it
little,
covers it. I'll make a motion to approve is this the draft or the final? The
This
final
would be the
draft?
final report.
The final report for rezoning request of 14740 Liberty Street from R1 Single Family Residential to I Institutional as submitted.
I second.
we have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. No opposition, the motion passes. All right. Now, on to item number 7, discussion and review of a single-family residential neighborhood development patterns.
Commissioners, we talked about this last month. Again, this was originated in the city council. They've asked us to, amend or provide a recommendation on an amendment for residential lot sizes. A lot to dig into here. I'm going to jump over, show my exhibits on the screen for the benefit of our audience. And find it real quick. So
I got the exhibit, so we're good.
you're good.
I printed them, I've got the color, so we're good.
Excellent. So,
Don't do anything for me, because I'm here.
so to preface this conversation or discussion with the commission, you guys should be aware of 2 bills right now that are making their way through the state legislative process. So, let me find my notes on where they are. So, the meat of this discussion and may actually, if the bills pass, this discussion won't do much good. So Senate Bill 1787 has been authored by, I believe it's Paul Bettencourt from the Houston area. He was, I think, the Harris County appraiser or tax collector or something down there. So he has proposed a bill that would make the minimum lot size, the minimum single-family residential lot size in the state 1,400 square feet. Our current ordinance is 9,000.
Yeah.
And it would allow as narrow as a 20-foot wide lot with a 60-foot depth. Now, you couldn't, in classic, classic lawmaker style, 60 by 20 doesn't equate to
It
1,400
doesn't.
square feet. So you can take one of those two minimums, but you've got to end up with 1,400 square feet. Don't know the chances of the bill or anything else, but I know it's on.
Is that Texas? Is that what you said?
Yeah, Mr. Betancourt was in Harris County, yes.
There's
He's all about tiny meat.
So there's another bill, that's Senate Bill 1412, that would prevent cities from regulating what you would typically, or what is called an accessory dwelling unit, or ADU. Basically, it's a garage apartment. It's what we call, a mother-in-law suite, a garage apartment. So our ordinance currently prevents that. And one of the changes that I've proposed is that we do away with that. It's really, whether someone has a garage apartment or a mother-in-law suite in their backyard, is there a material benefit to the health, safety, and welfare of the general public by limiting people using their type of home like that? So there is a bill now that would prevent cities from preventing mother-in-law suites or a garage apartment. So those two bills, one on the minimum lot sizes for single family. So there's a push in the legislature to reinstitute some of the private property rights that they feel like have been lost. Certainly, when you look at a law that would allow a developer to build a whole bunch of 1,500 square foot lots, seems like something that's hard to get our heads around. But it's there. So with that out of the way, I can now talk about the other stuff that we're talking about, which is, again, kind of the way that minimum lot sizes and developments in general all, shake out at the end. I've included in your packet.
Guys, we wanted to come in and say thank you for your time.
Yes, thank
We
you.
didn't want to just take off.
Thank you. Good to see you. Take care.
So again, this is just a review of our current regulation, 75 by 200, or I'm sorry, 75 by 120, minimum of 9,000 square foot lot, no open space requirements if those are met. And if a lot is less than 9,000 square feet, we currently require one-to-one compensating open space. So I thought it might be helpful, just because visuals help, to look at some of the neighborhoods that are here in the city. If the information was available, I tried to put some metrics to it. So starting off, and I'm on page 30 of your packet, if we look at the Hills of Town Creek neighborhood, total density is about 4.2 homes per acre, largely 50-foot lots out there. 7.3% of the site is open space. I'm going to move to the next page and show you just an aerial of Buffalo Springs from a macro sense. I realize that there's estates of Lake Creek Village, there's Lake Creek Village, and the original section of Buffalo Springs here. This, to me, is what you want to see in residential developments. You've got a mix of housing sizes, lot sizes, everything from a handful of duplexes all the way up to large, 100-foot wide frontage lots. Terra Vista is very similar and actually not very different from Hills of Town Creek in terms of the overall density of it. Again, you can see 50-foot lots. They only have 1% of the site is dedicated to open space. I have a feeling that is because they were able to use some of the open space in Waterstone that's adjacent to Terra Vista.
Yes, I believe so, when that came up. So the only green space they've got is right along that
reserve.
That reserve.
On that south side.
Yep, on the right-hand side, you can see one empty lot right in the middle. And it's a drainage reserve. And that's the only actual, reserve that they have. So I think they must have, when the city approved that back in 2017, 18 timeframe, that must have been based on the fact that they they were using open space from the rest of Waterstone.
There's a possibility down the road that could be something that hooks them up to Waterstone through the back section there.
Right, the name of the subdivision is Terra Vista at Waterstone. It was the same developer who put the whole deal together with, that and Waterstone. So, the next two are the proposed, or either under construction or proposed neighborhoods that we've got. The Pulte one, the Montgomery Bend, which is the 45-foot lots. You can see that they actually are proposing less density overall than what, say, Hills of Town Creek has. Their density is in the high 3.7 units per acre. And the last one, which is Redbird Meadows, the large, almost 400-acre development that's on the southwest side of the city. They have a lot of open space that's currently planned in the neighborhood, and their density is 1.8 units per acre. So you can see, even with some smaller lot sizes, they have a mix of 60-foot, 70-foot, and 80-foot lots is what their current plans call for. Their density is still very low because of the amount of open space. So it's not necessarily, the lot size is not the end-all be-all when it comes to, what the overall density of the neighborhood is. And I pulled a couple from the area. There was one that I happened to pass on 1488, and I was interested in what that looked like, and that's a Del Webb. It's also by Pulte. Again, they've got a large amount of open space. It looks like it's dedicated to drainage, but they have 2.9 homes per acre. And just looking at it, I think the takeaway for me is just looking at it, I wouldn't guess it was that low. It looks a lot denser than that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Fairwater, which is right outside the city here on 2854, they had an overall density of about 3.2 homes per acre, so still under what Hills of Town Creek and Terra Vista and those guys are. So on the next page, under the discussion and kind of the conclusion and recommendations, so a couple thoughts is, to me, if the city reduces its minimum lot size, that takes away the only leverage that you have for open space. To me, I think we've got a very appropriate threshold. That my suggestion would be, if we want to allow, say, a 60-foot lot, that we require one-to-one compensating open space. Somebody wants to come in and propose a project for 50-foot lots. Okay, well, that's a 3-to-1 ratio for open space. Where we let the market drive the size of the lots, the size of the product, and what the product is. What we want to control is the view in the example there, the bottom right of 35. Same lot, same number of homes, just totally different in terms of land development pattern. And, I think what we want in our regulations is, options and a clear framework. We want to give developers options where it's not, hey, if you want to come build houses in the city, if you build 60-foot lots, you can build them all day long. That's all you got to build. That's all you got to worry about, and you don't, have any issues at all. Do we want just the exact same lot size everywhere in the city?
Right.
I think we want a framework that folks can follow, that makes sense, that allows them to adjust based on what the market's doing, based on what, the construction costs may be. I think if we try to regulate that type of thing in the city, or we create a regulation that starts to dip into those, then we're going to have a really hard, we're going to end up in the same place with lots of variances. To me, I don't really get heartburn over a 50-foot lot. I may not want to move on it, but if someone does, I can appreciate that they would. I think from a development standpoint, what we want is to ensure that there's open space within that neighborhood, that if someone wants to let the dog run around or something like that, that those opportunities are there. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any thoughts or questions. This is going to be one of the things that we're going to talk about in the joint workshop with council. So I didn't want to, that's why I put it as a discussion item only. I don't feel like we, need or have a reason to try and rush to a recommendation. If this is going to be something that we can really dialogue with the council on, and you guys can understand kind of what their goals are, they can understand what your concerns are. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any thoughts or questions or take suggestions on what to add to this or change.
Oh, well, I mean, thank you for this.
Yes.
This was very helpful. This answered, I believe this was our inquiry, this was our feedback from our last meeting. You really answered it. You put together the study that we requested. So I appreciate it. I believe we all do.
Yes.
Yes, I agree.
Yep, that was good.
And under conclusions and recommendations, that really helps put things in perspective. We've had a lot of good conversations, and I think we all know why we kind of got tired of that builders coming and asking for variances, and that was all a good point too. But looking back, you know, we have said no on 4 or 5 that were maybe too tight, one way in, one way out, even with Philip, we had on phase 2. But I guess the point is, we've got, after all the good discussions, we know, I think we have a lot of information to know when we can say no, based on facts. But then also, we all agree that we'd really rather see minimum probably 50, and even more important than that is 7.5 on each side setbacks. That's the conclusion I think we really came to last time.
I like 55, but yeah.
Yeah, or 55, but
I like
maybe
55.
depending on where, but
I
this,
wouldn't like that, but-
we always have that option
Yeah.
in a high-density area.
Yes.
Conroe's sitting at 40, just so you know.
What's that?
City of Conroe's sitting at 40.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's temporary, but they've been back.
It's temporary.
Are they? I thought they
It's been
bumped
that
back
for a
up to
long
50.
time.
Well, they went to 40, then they went back to,
I thought they went back up to 50.
yeah.
Yeah, I think
That
they
may-
went back up to 50 because there was a
Yeah.
lot of
Is
hollering.
it? I was
Yeah.
looking at that today to compare it to Conroe, Willis, Magnolia. I mean, Willis is at 60. Magnolia doesn't really have one. It's a 5-foot side yard or 15% of lot width.
And Dave, these diagrams are great because I've never put it in this perspective before. But I would just like to say, like, if we're gonna do compensating green space, like, who maintains that? Are you gonna pass that on to the homeowner who owns a little bitty lot? And then what do those fees look like?
Right.
And the compensating green space is a great idea in theory, but it comes at a huge cost for
It doesn't all have
maintenance
to
and
be,
overhead.
it doesn't all have to be maintained. I mean, that's one thing that our ordinance allows now. With compensating open space, it can be active or passive. And, you know, passive is code word for, it's a natural area, it's gonna stay a natural area. You can walk out in it and use it, but, you know, to your point, you know, we don't wanna, you know, we don't want.
But is that's what you have to decide, is that better to have unmanaged green space, or is it better to force people into larger lots where people would, in theory, maintain their own larger lot? Like, I have 10 acres and I mow it. You know, it's not just wild vegetation, but it's, I own it, you know, like, it's mine, I have a personal stake in it. But if it's compensating green space, somebody doesn't own it, it's not their pride, it's not their responsibility.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
And I think Dave really touched on that in here. I'm not sure where, but I agree. You know, compensating green space is critical for certain areas, because we all want quality of life.
Absolutely.
And we don't all have the big lots. But I think Dave really hit on what you're getting at is, he said, future funding city versus, you know, with HOA or MUD dealing with future funding.
Right, you know, if we, you know, say, you know, to
Trails.
that point, if we, you know, create a restriction that says, oh, for 55-foot lots or for 50-foot lots, you've got to create a park. Well, if we do that, then we're, you know, we have to
Then you're
acknowledge we're locking people into costs, whether that's the city's cost and the taxpayers are going to pick up the cost, whether it's an HOA, you know, managed park. Like in Hills of Town Creek now, they've got a little kid park. That's a private park. It's maintained by the HOA. But if they had a 5-acre, you know, large park that, you know, had to be mowed and maintained, you know, they would probably feel, you know, the financial pressure of, okay, I don't, you know, so we don't want to, again, we don't want to create something that is really only attainable by a certain demographic. You know, for someone who's making, you know, 6 figures and is looking for a 50-foot lot, that's a completely different, you know, person and product than a young family starting out. needing a 50-foot lot because that's what they can, get mortgaged for.
Yeah.
So we want to just be mindful of, where we are protecting the, the health, safety, and welfare of the public, but we're not, locking them into something that's not, realistic. Or again, that the city has a number of parks. My sense is we're not itching for the chance to create a bunch of new ones to take care of. I love it, but that's the reality of, city, finances.
Right.
So,
And this has all been good discussion. I know we talked a while back about, we're a little further out in the country than Conroe, so our minimum lots should be a little larger than Conroe. And those are things that can guide us.
Yep.
There's still a lot of acreage around.
Agreed.
But our land value is astronomically higher than the city of Conroe. So you have to take into consideration that if you want the city to grow, builders, they have an upfront cost to build and develop. And for them to be profitable, to even want to come into our city and to develop, they're gonna need those smaller lot widths to make a profit. That's just the reality of the game. You're paying more for land, you gotta put more houses on it in order to make it reasonable. So that's the big thing we're dealing with, Everybody thinks everybody in Montgomery makes millions of dollars. Well, some of them are generational landowners that don't.
And not to get off topic, but that is a good point. We're so glad to see the Montgomery Independent School District come in with this ag and trades, just like we've been very impressed with the one in Willis. What
Well, we're gonna train all these kids in trades.
yeah, and that's,
They all want to live here, they grew up here, they can't, I have a 20-year-old living at home, he can't afford to move out on his own, and he makes good money, he can't afford to live on his own because he wants to live here in Montgomery, it's too expensive.
well, it's a great program, and it's got a good track record. They're coming out of high school with the experience and with good pay. So,
if you guys, in between now and the joint workshop, if you got any thoughts on it, just on the whole discussion of lot sizes and things, again, I think our primary recommendation from staff would be to budget for and employ a consultant to come in and really help us with our development codes and regulations, where we've got the experience of a consultant who, has seen this stuff, they've worked with this stuff, and they understand, how to tie it all together and make it all work as opposed to.
How, I know you probably don't know right offhand, what acreage is left residential-wise that is not in the, that developer?
In Buffalo Springs PD.
Yeah, how many acres outside of that we're gonna have control of on a program like this? Because we really don't have control in there.
Right, that's the one.
So how many residential acres are not under the development
vast
agreement?
majority, I'd say, 75% of the city now, just, and again, I'm kind of, I am taking a guess, but I think about 75% or so of the city is undeveloped R1 single-family residential right now.
Okay, outside of the
Outside of the
developer.
area. Right, if we take that off the table, of all the land that's left, I bet about 3/4 of it is undeveloped R1 right now.
Okay.
So it's really, kind of the default zone, in our zoning anyway, for the commercial is along the corridors.
Right.
There's a little bit of industrial up top, but everything else is under R1.
Right, and so we do have some type of a handle on what the city of future is going to look like, but with what we decide on.
Right.
That's got 800 acres alone still, I think, up here on the Lone Star Parkway that's not zoned.
Well, that's not.
It's not part of the Buffalo Springs tract on the
right.
outside of the Lone Star Parkway, not the inside.
Right.
It's not platted, it's just, it's farmland right now, so it's all zoned.
So anywhere inside the city, again, most just raw land, if it's not on a major corridor, it's on R1.
Right.
Now, so this would be one of the bigger things that we could change. Say, if we were looking at, the residential requirements for development versus side setbacks in the commercial district, that's just,
Right.
Anything that we do on the commercial side, it's gonna have an impact, but it's just not gonna affect nearly the landing area like.
But I think we're being more impacted on the development outside the city than we are being
Yep.
within with
And it's a
the
really tough balance.
people, huh?
That's just because it's literally, like the 88th legislative said, turned into the Wild Wild West. We reversed all our annexation laws, so even Willis and Conroe can no longer annex without somebody asking to be annexed in.
Right.
And so now everybody's just going and creating their MUDs and at will saying, we're gonna do whatever we want because we own this land.
Right.
And that's the benefit of making sure that we're in some kind of steadfast agreement with the pulse going on around us, so that, one, we don't miss out on the ad valorem, and they don't want to just go into a mud versus coming into the city. But two, the pass-through of that, we don't want just this transient traffic. We don't want to be a bedroom community. I don't think we do. I would hope that we want the benefit of the ad valorem and the sales and use combined for the budget, but I feel like we've missed the mark. I say we, I just mean the whole city, as far as having the super high. It's great in theory to be like the Woodlands and have 75-foot with lot width restrictions, but it's not fiduciarily wise for builders or developers to want to. And there's still a 1,000-acre tract behind Berkshire Brothers. You know, Juanita and I are inside the city back here, and there's 7 of us there. There's probably 100 acres between the 7 of us back there. I mean, there's a lot of land that's undeveloped that's inside the city limits still.
Sure, yeah.
That is R1. So this isn't just going to be a small impact. However, I could not imagine putting 40 homes on my property. Like, I just cringe at the thought, like, oh, no.
But yeah, that's true. Going south on 149, there's a lot of potential out that way.
Well, and don't forget that J-hook. You know, the city has that J-hook downtown 149 as far as the city right-of-way or boundaries. But it's not the ETJ. The J-hook is the actual city limits, and then the ETJ extends out from that.
So the J-hook, we do have a 10-foot strip that runs down 149 down Spring Branch. And then we've got an ETJ set around that.
Yeah.
Very solid, back to 73.
That ETJ out there is huge on the south side.
So,
And prime for development because everything's coming in along 1486. Have you driven 1486 lately?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Okay. All right, well, it's, you know, we know it's all happening in a lot of areas, and we appreciate the input. We had a little casual conversation, but it's helpful. It's helpful. It's good.
So any other feedback or thoughts on this? Again, the intent is to march this into that workshop with council, not on the 11th, but on the 17th.
Okay.
To be able, again, for the P&Z and the council, just to kind of have some dialogues, and some open conversations about where you guys want to take the residential lot size discussion.
Good.
That's all assuming that the state's not going to preempt us sometime this summer and pass these 2 bad bills.
Well, again, we thank you, everybody here. I really appreciates the information, putting this together. On to item number 8, consideration and possible action on calling 2 public hearings to be held on May 2nd, 2023, related to a rezoning request for R1 single-family residential to B commercial for 14640 Liberty Street, Montgomery, Texas.
Commissioners, again, we did receive a rezoning application for the property. We are not discussing or deliberating it tonight. All we're doing is calling public hearings. This property is just before you go over the hill. If you know where Kimberly Ducky lives, a newer house on the right. It's it's a 2-story house, party up top and limestone on the bottom. So that was sold. She sold it maybe a year or 2 ago to some real estate company. They put it up for sale or lease. A realtor from town here has purchased the property with the hopes of moving his real estate office onto the property and is asking to be rezoned. And the first step in that is to call public hearing.
Okay.
You're going to have a lot of public.
I'll make a motion to call public hearing to be held on May 2nd, 2023 for the rezoning from R1's single-family residence to be commercial for 14640 Liberty Street, Montgomery, Texas.
I'll second.
We have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor say aye. 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 No opposition, the motion passes. And that's it on the items on the agenda. Any comments on commission inquiries? I'll just mention, I forgot to mention this in the beginning, Dave has acknowledged that we'll have the minutes for the March meeting at the next meeting. There was a little glitch, I'm getting that together for tonight, but we can review the minutes next time.
Okay.
Okay? All right. You need a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. 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 The motion passes. Thank you all.